Hello and welcome. I am Scrapperlock. This is City of Heroes. We are with our level 34 Brute. Liberty Lass. 2.6 million XP earned, 400,000 to go to the next level, 12.6 million influence. And we're in the story arc Library of Souls, and you've missed a couple of chapters of that story arc because I recorded a 35 or 40-minute session yesterday, and I don't know, something's wrong with the microphone. The sound was really weird, and it just wasn't audible properly. There was always like crackling and stuff. I don't know what I did. Maybe I had the mic too close to my mouth, although usually that doesn't affect things. But so I don't know. We're in the still Library of Lost Souls, or what this is saying, Library of Souls, although I could swear it used to be called Library of Lost Souls story arc, and we're going to Brickstown to liberate the Library of Lost Souls. This might be the end of the story arc. I hope not, because otherwise you guys missed a whole bunch of it. On the other hand, I was mostly just chatting and not paying a lot of attention to the story arc, so I don't know how much you realistically missed. We're going to finish this story arc, and then if this finishes right away, we'll do some more missions for our existing contacts, and then I will go off screen again and do some missions for the flashbacks. I'm going to be going back into the teens now, I think, because I've done everything, just about everything in the 20s, other than the really new stuff that I don't. That's stylistically like Who Will Die that I don't like, because I think there's a chapter of the Who Will Die story arc in that level as well. So as we go, I do want to mention something that. So I was asked in the comments section, what do I do as a melee character against the Vajaloks? And so I gave a fairly brief answer, a couple of sentences there. I want to expand on it and actually pull these guys out instead of getting caught in this hallway diamond thing where there's usually two groups. Anyway, I gave, in the last episode, I gave a really long rambling answer. Hopefully I'll be able to be a little bit more concise here, but I actually want to sort of give essentially three different answers to the question, right? So the question is, you're playing a melee character, and I think what the person asking had been frustrated by was a lot of Vajaloks in the low levels. And based on the question, although I'm not sure if the person said, so forgive me if I'm incorrect, but I think this probably was someone who struggled in the low levels with the fact that they're doing perhaps smashing damage, and they're struggling with the fact that the smashing damage is highly resisted by a number of the types of Vajalok enemies that you fight at those low levels, such as cadavers and later abominations or whatever, and the embalmed. And those guys very highly resist smashing. And they also, quite irrelevant to the fact that they have resistances to smashing, are incredibly painful to fight for literally everyone because they're toxic attacks. Almost nobody's got, and I'll point out this in a little bit, but almost nobody has at that level defense. Almost nobody has any defense against toxic at all, with very few defense set exceptions, but certainly not at 5th or 7th or 10th level when they're doing all this toxic to you. And as somebody pointed out, which I didn't realize, some of the Vajalok vomit of the toxic sludge is coded as in the code base as an AoE with a small radius rather than a single target attack, which means even if you're somebody like super reflexes and you have ranged and melee defense, it's not going to work because it's an AoE attack, and melee and ranged and AoE are three different types of attacks. So we're looking for 10 soul crystals to liberate the library, and there's one right there, so we're going to have to fight these guys. So let's talk about that. So this is the problem we've presented, right? You are at a major disadvantage if you're doing smashing melee, which a lot of them are. So one of the first things to talk about is the fact that in the melee power sets, and things are a little bit different now with Homecoming because they've done sort of an expanded version of what City of Heroes called power set proliferation, where they allow the power sets to go across archetypes. So, for example, Energy Melee was originally just a tanker set, and now I think it's Scrapper, Stalker, and Brute as well. It's obviously Brute, but I think Scrappers and Stalkers as well. And that's true for some of the other power sets, like Fire used to be Fire Melee and Ice Melee were tanker only and no Scrapper, but I think the Scrappers have some of those now. But I don't know if they have all of them. So anyway, before power set proliferation happened, the melee characters were very strongly skewed toward having smashing as the most common and lethal, which is like stabbing with knives and stuff, as the second most common of their types of attack damage type, right? And so the problem with that is that the Vajalox are primarily defended against the smashing attacks, and secondarily they do have some resistances to lethal, although not as much as they do to smashing. So when I'm talking about this, I just want to be clear what I mean. We're not talking about an individual, right? These individuals either have smashing resistance or they don't. But there are different types of enemies in a faction. So the Earththorn casters are one type, and then the so that's one type, and then like the Behemoths are another type, and the Spectral Demons are another. And so the Earththorn casters have defense rather than resistance, and I don't know if it's smashing defense or not. The Behemoths have like fire resistance, but not lethal and smashing resistance. The Spirits have smashing resistance, but not lethal resistance, or vice versa. And so it's smashing, I think. And so depending on the power set you have and what damage type it does, that's going to cause you to do more or less damage to the enemies. And so I think let's take a step back. This is more disorganized than I wanted. And take a look at the different damage types. And what you see here is we have smashing, which is like punches, lethal, which is stabbing and slicing swords and daggers, fire resistance, cold resistance, energy resistance, which is what this character is doing, partially, but we also do some smashing. And then psionic and negative energy, which is like dark, psionic and toxic. And I want to look at the combat here. And what you can see, we hit this Earththorn caster with our Bone Smasher. We did 100 points of energy and 64 points of smashing. So let's take a look at the info of where is Bone Smasher. And Bone Smasher says we're doing 60 energy damage to a target and 40 smashing, right? And so that's unenhanced, and now we've enhanced it. So we're doing about 2/3 energy and 1/3 smashing, and so that's about what this is. So that target didn't have resistance to either energy or smashing. If he had energy resistance of say 50%, then we would have still done 64 smashing but only 50 energy and vice versa. So one of the reasons I put this up is that although it's not perfect, the list here is about ranked in order with some tweaks as the frequency with which you are going to find different types of enemies that have resistance or defense is dodging against that damage type. So the one where the most enemy types will resist or be defended against is smashing. So when you're using smashing damage, you're going to be doing less than max damage and less than max to hit against far more mobs than any other type of damage in the game. The second one, just barely underneath that, is lethal. Right? The reason is these are mundane attacks, bullets, knives, punches, and most things can, you can put on a bulletproof vest and you're protected against bullets, right? Then energy, cold, and fire are about equal in their frequency. Like 90% of mobs seem to have smashing, some kind of defense against smashing. It's probably an over-exaggeration. Maybe let's say 50% of mobs do, 50% of enemy types. Maybe another, 30% have it against lethal, but only a small fraction, 10, 15, 20% will have defenses against fire, cold, or energy. And then negative energy is even a rarer one to find them having defense against, which is why dark is such a nice set. And then almost nobody has psionic or toxic resistance. And this is reflected in the player characters because willpower is the only defense set that has any defenses against psionic, and the same is true with the NPCs. Okay, so with a smashing character, the problem you're having, especially at low level, is almost every single faction has some or even all of the enemies in it that have resistance against this. And if they don't resist that, they're resisting lethal. And so what you're facing against the Vajalox isn't that it's the Vajalox, right? It's that its low-level enemies primarily have smashing resistance, and the Vajalox have a lot of it. Okay? And so the question, if the answer to what do I do is pick one of these other types of attacks, right? Pick a power set that does the other thing. So energy melee will do better against Vajalox because 2/3 of the damage it's doing is something they don't have defense against. So yes, they will resist the smashing portion of the attack, but they will not resist the energy portion, right? And fire can be even better against Vajalox because I think the Vajalox are vulnerable to it, which means they take more damage from it. The cadavers and the abominations, I think. You'd have to do some tests to see if that's still true. I think it was true years ago. At least they don't resist it. I don't think they resist ice. I don't think they resist energy. The other thing to look at, though, when you're looking at what set to do, is it doing primarily or entirely one damage type, or is it a mix? So in energy melee, yes, not that many things resist energy, but energy is only part of the damage. Almost every time we hit something, there are two numbers. One of the numbers is smashing, and one of the numbers is energy. And anything that resists one of the two will not take maximum damage from our attack. So fire, I think, and I said this in the comments, has several, it's not all the attacks. Like, I think Fire Sword is part lethal, part heat, part fire. But some of the things, like when you breathe fire, and a couple of the other types of attacks that you do as a fire character, I'm pretty sure are only fire. And so the Vajalox will resist none of that. Okay? So if you're looking for attacks that don't get resisted, not only by the Vajalox, but by a lot of the enemies, what you want to do is look to the bottom of this list. Dark, or anything that does negative damage, psionic, and things like spines, which do toxic. But remember, spines are part toxic, part lethal. Right? Some of the dark might, like the dark melee is going to be part smashing, part dark, and some of the psionic may be part smashing, part psionic, depending on whether you're doing melee or whatever. We're talking about melee characters. A lot of melee characters are going to do part lethal or smashing and part the other damage. And you're just going to have to look at the powers and click on the information screen in character creation to see which ones do primarily the non-smashing, non-lethal damage. Okay, so that's kind of what that paragraph that I wrote was about. I then talked about the utility of doing a fire ice tanker. This is a fire defense primary and ice attack secondary. And the reason this works pretty well is in the ice secondary, you have, at least this is the way it used to be, but remember, I haven't done this since like 2009 in live. And it's possible that this has been patched out of the game. So somebody in the comments, let us know if it's still correct. But the way it worked during live was, and a friend of mine hit on this, and then I shamelessly copied him when I started playing the game a year or two later. But the way this worked in live, back in like 2008, 9, 10, was you would lay down an ice patch. Ice patches cause knockdown. And the enemies would get knocked down. They try to get up, they get knocked down. They try to get up, they get knocked down. And you basically could keep them pinned to the floor. And I don't know if you needed hasten for this, but with the right combo of hasten and recharge inspiration enhancements, you could basically chain the ice patch so that it went on forever, right? And they couldn't get out of it. And then what you would do after... What you would do after that is you would throw down a burn patch on top of the ice. Now, realistically, you might say, well, shouldn't the burn melt the ice? But superpowers in City of Heroes don't work that way. They don't interfere with each other like that. So you have these guys being knocked down, knocked down, knocked down, and you throw a burn patch in the same place. Okay, now the ordinary thing for enemies to do in City of Heroes when they're hit with a burn patch is to run out of the patch. But because you've already got them in the knockdown cycle, they can't run away. And that means that they're stuck in the burn patch and you can just melt them. Now, it's not quick, but it will work, and it's pretty safe because they can't do anything while they're being repeatedly knocked down. I wish I had my old character Comet Flare from Live that I could show you how to do it, and I would just make a little video of how to do it. Hopefully the description is coherent and makes sense. Now, the problem with that regarding the Vajjalak is you cannot do that in low levels at the levels where you're facing Vajjalaks. And I didn't really think about that when I was writing the instructions. You're going to probably need recharge, single origin, triple recharge, single origin, and you're going to need single origin damage enhancers and stuff like that. And you're not going to be able to do that at 10th, 12th level when you're fighting Vajjalaks. It's just, that's not going to work, and so I just want everybody to kind of be aware of that. So it'll work later, but it's not going to work against the Vajjalaks specifically. So now that I've talked about like how to do it and why it works and why it doesn't work and so on and so forth, I wanted to talk about whether you should do it at all and how to decide whether to do something like switching to fire or dark or whatever to defeat the Vajjalaks. And I think that there are two issues here. The first is to remember that as frustrating as the Vajjalaks might be at level 5, the Vajjalaks go away as an enemy faction at level 19, and you will never, barring some flashbacks or weird one-off missions in alternate dimensions, you're never going to face the Vajjalaks again. Okay? So, I do not recommend doing an entire build, selecting an entire power set or archetype for your character just based on the fact that the Vajjalaks are frustrating. Okay, either tough it out, lower the notoriety to -1, or don't take those missions. Just autocomplete whichever one you have and don't take the Vajjalak Plague story arc, don't take the Dr. Vajjalak story arc, and just ignore them. Come back and do them as a flashback when your character is higher level and you've got more inspiration slots, right? And make sure you set the notoriety down to +0 when you do that, and you'll probably be fine. So I don't think it's wise to pick what your power set and archetype and all of that will be based on the frustrations you're having with a single type of enemy. These things are freaking cool. These ice guys, I don't know that I've ever seen them before. I just noticed them in the last play session that I didn't that I recorded but had bad sound. These are really cool. I like them. I don't know if these are like from one of the winter events and they just brought them in or what. Wow, I'm getting my butt kicked. So yeah, I mean, it's just like this, right? The Earth Thorn casters are slowing me and pounding on me, and they're hard to hit because Earth is a defense set, a plus defense set, not resistance, as weird as that sounds. It wouldn't make sense for me to set up the slots of this character just to be Earth Thorn casters. After this story arc, I'm probably not going to fight them again for a long time, if at all. Right? In the Circle of Thorns, not only the Circle of Thorns is an unusual faction in that the circle exists at all levels, right? You fight them from level 1 or 2 or 3 all the way up into the 40s, but the types of mobs that you fight within the circle change. So the demons are going to cycle out by the late 30s. We had Fire Thorns. They've now started to cycle out. Now we've got Earth Thorns, and then they're going to get swapped out for Air Thorn casters in the 40s or late 30s. And so it changes as you level up, and so you have to be careful not to tune your character to fight a type of enemy that you're only ever going to see for a short period of time. I know, believe me, I know how frustrating the Vajalok can be. Whoops. Believe me, I know that. I'm so bad at flying, which is why I prefer super jump. I know how frustrating the Vajalok can be. Believe me, I know. Going all the way back to open beta and the start of live with my super reflex scrapper, who I didn't have the because of swift health and stamina, I wasn't able to get around to making the getting the ranged defense until I think she was like 18th level, the toggle. So she had no range defense against the Vajaloks at all, which means the Reapers were and the Mortificators with their crossbows were just cutting her to ribbons. And then she had no AoE defense other than her. I think she had the range passive, but not the toggle. She had no AoE defense at all because those don't come in until the 20s, after you're not fighting the Vajaloks anymore. So the vomits were hitting her like crazy, and it was literally like she had no defenses at all because she didn't. And that character died over and over and over again to Vajaloks, both in solo missions and in group missions. And I felt like she was so fragile because I didn't know what I was doing, but also because the Vajaloks are just like this. And you can go back and watch Quintessence Lass on the Rebirth server. You can watch my videos with Silver Phoenix, with any of my other characters. Every one of my characters struggles against Vajaloks. It's just the way the Vajaloks are. And just switching to fire is not going to make all of that go away. It will make it easier than super strength, but it's not going to make it all go away. The Vajaloks are they're just meant to be toughies. It's just the way they are. Sort of the counter action to that, right? One of the reasons they're so tough is that the cadavers, which are the overwhelming majority of Vajaloks, are stupid as anything. So one of the things you want to try to do is take the Reapers out first, because they guide the Vajaloks, same thing with the Mortificators. And then you can kind of run away, and they'll forget about you and stop running and chasing you. And look, don't be too proud to try to do single pulls and stuff like that. You can go back and watch my videos to see how I do it. And don't be too proud to put the notoriety on -1 just to get through it. If it's that big of a problem, guys. There's no shame in it, right? Those guys were coded by the developers to be very tough, and they expected you to go get groups to handle it. So if you're melee character, you don't have your defenses in at 3rd or 4th level because you only have a couple of powers, and you're fighting Vajaloks, yeah, they're going to be hard. But I would say don't get so frustrated that you completely change your power set and your archetype, or both, one or the other or both, just because of Vajaloks or any low-level mob. They will go away. You're not going to fight them forever. So what you want to do is come up with powers that you like and a power set that plays the way you want to play it, and then you can enjoy that power set no matter what, right? And that will allow you to have fun, right? Because it won't matter that you fought the Vajaloks for a few levels because you're enjoying the power set. So I love energy melee. And yeah, even if the Vajaloks were tough for a few levels, I wouldn't care because energy melee is awesome. It's got some really great powers in it, and I'm having a great time. Plus, it looks really cool, and I love when powers look cool. I mean, that's actually the most important thing to me is they need to look and sound cool, and if they do, I'm happy. And if they don't, I don't really care how much damage they do or how easy it is. Okay, but so, you know, my advice I think potentially works, but I would just caution people against making a decision about something as important and big for your character as the archetype, which is going to last all the way to level 50, or the power set, which is going to affect all of your primary and secondary choices to level 50, and there's 18 different power set choices, right? And gosh, what the heck? We still have 3 more to find, and I feel like I missed something. I mean, obviously I must have. Yeah, don't make those decisions based on one type of enemy. Even if it's something like Circle of Thorns, where you're going to fight them for, you know, you could potentially fight them for all 50 levels. You're not going to only fight them. At most, usually you get one faction type per 5-level range, right? You're not going to fight. You're not going to have more than one story arc at a time per 5-level range for one type of mob, right? So we fought the Circle of Thorns here at level 34, but our other story arcs weren't about the Circle of Thorns. They were about Fifth Column and Council and various other enemy types, right? So I urge people not to make a decision based on a single faction at a single level range, because as I said, even though the Circle of Thorns is around for the entire level range from 1 to 50, who you fight amongst the circle changes as you level up, right? So I, for one, really don't like the demons because of the debuffing they do. And around this level, they start to become less frequent. As you can see, we don't see them in every single spawn. And eventually they're going to cycle out. They're going to be replaced by the Airthorn Casters and the Behemoths. And we're not going to see them again. Right? And the circle is actually kind of fun to fight in the upper levels because you don't get the Spectral Demons very much. And you get things that are a little more fun to fight. And less frustrating. Right? So I fully sympathize with the frustration of Vajilak, especially if you've got a smashing melee attack, because they're brutally hard compared to the other types of enemies. But don't let it make your whole decision on your character, because there are other enemies that are going to be vulnerable to you. For instance, in smashing, the other enemies at low level that you get a lot of the Clockworks, and they're vulnerable to smashing, and they're resistant to lethal and energy. So yeah, it all just depends on who you're fighting, and also depends a little bit on what frustrates you. And that's my second point, which is also be careful about making decisions about what other people say will work, because it works for me, might not work for you, or might work for you but not be any fun, right? So I highly recommend that you do some trial and error for what's most fun for you, right? This is how I found what I liked, right? I did trial and error. Is this the librarian? Okay. I did trial and error and found what I enjoy. And now I'm a melee character player. I play melee characters, brutes, scrappers, stalkers, love it so much. And I know that, and if I'm going to play smashing like martial arts, I know what I'm in for, and I go in with my eyes open. I've done it before, and I know how to handle it, right? So that's my recommendation. My recommendation to you is do some trial and error. Do your homework. Look at the damage types and how much, go in character creation. You can see all the info. So look at the damage types and look at what percentage, It's easier to see at low level because you're not working with big numbers like 97 and 43, but you're working like 10 and 6. And it's easy to see what the proportion of smashing damage or lethal damage versus energy or fire or cold is, right? So my recommendation to you is check that out. Think about what I said about how common the defenses are for everyone, not just Vajilaks. And then, then you can make a decision and try some stuff out and see what works for you. But just be very careful not to make too many rash decisions about how your character performs under level 20 with like training or dual origin enhancements on it, because it really doesn't come into its own until you're getting around 30. And I know that's a long time to wait, and I actually said that in the City of Heroes forums when I was complaining about how weak scrappers seemed to be to me, and I was like 15th level, with my first character in City of Heroes, my scrapper, and the what did that say? In memory of who? I couldn't see it. I don't see anything. I was like 15th level, and I was complaining, right, that it was too hard, and we were talking about how scrappers are playing COH on hard mode. That's not even close when you get into the upper levels. And one of the veteran Scrapper players said, okay, but you haven't seen what your Scrapper can really do. Now we have to rescue Zoria and Akarist. So these are being taken by the rest of the circle, and they're going to put the souls from the Library of Lost Souls in them, I think. Let's sell our enhancements here because we don't need them. Anyway, I said, this is a struggle and blah, blah, blah. And somebody said, well, basically everything from 1 to 20 is sort of like a tutorial, and your character won't really come into his own until you get close to level 30. And really level 32, which is when you had to wait to get your final primary power. And I said, that's ridiculous. What does this say? In memory of at power. Oh, so somebody must have died, perhaps. I hope not, but that's what it kind of looks like. This one says AFK, but here in spirit. So yeah, I guess they're doing a memorial for somebody. That's sad. Don't know who that was. Probably somebody on the Discord that I haven't really been watching the Discord at all. So anyway, getting away from that sad note, back to the story. I was livid. Like, how can you possibly put out a game that goes to level 40 and you're telling me I'm not even out of the tutorial until I'm like level 26? But it's true. It takes that long. You're finally into single origins by the time you're in your late 20s. You might not be able to afford them at 22, especially you couldn't during launch. And the level 26 power is your second best in martial arts. It all changed for me. At level 26, I got Dragon's Tail, which was the only AoE in martial arts. I finally had SOs on my powers, maybe it's level 27, and I went into, I've told this story, went into Independence Port, found a bunch of orange and mobs with red lieutenants. It was like a spawn of family, like 8 or 10 guys plus a red lieutenant. I went in there and I crushed them. And I was like, oh, that's what these guys are talking about. And by level 30, I was like, Scrappers are awesome, and they're not hard mode, they're easy mode. Right? And that's, by then, that's where the story in the early 30s, I think, is when my friend Fiend Hunter, who was a Spines Regen Scrapper, and I managed to, we split up 2 different sides of a warehouse. I've told this story. We were in a group of 8. The other 6, controllers, defenders, blasters, went one way, 6 people taking on an 8-man spawn. And Fiend Hunter and I, we said, we'll take the other one. They're like, seriously, guys? We're like, yeah, no problem. And they all face planted. Fiend Hunter went over to help them, and I basically soloed what was left of our spawn. It was equivalent of soloing like a 5-man spawn. Right? And people do this all the time now, right? Especially easy to do with Scrappers and Brutes. Look what we're doing, right? We're on +1. We're going to probably need to move to +2 soon. I want to put a few more accuracy enhancements. If we look here, I'd like to get double accuracy on these guys. And then I think we might move to +2s, which will sometimes give us +3s. And it's going to be hard, but heck, anything below orange is just too easy now, right? Or, well, yeah, orange. Right, this is orange lieutenant. But like orange minions, the red lieutenants can be rough, the purple bosses can be rough, but, we're doing great. Look at this. Bam. And I don't even have all the enhancements set up. So, yeah, that's how it is to be a Scrapper when you're in the 30s, or a Brute. Right? But we couldn't do it in the teens. And you could say, well, Scrapper yourself nerfing by not taking those, enhancements they give you at gameplay launch and stuff when you first create your character. Yeah, whatever. But it's still a lot harder in the teens and the single digits than it is in the 30s, right? Now your character is a Brute. You're the way Brutes were meant to be played. It's hard to do some of that stuff at really low levels. But once you're at higher levels, you can do it, right? And so there's an extent to which you have to accept that the lower levels gameplay is never going to be like the higher level gameplay. And it's really frustrating because it could take I don't know, dozens of hours. I don't know how many hours I've played this character. I mean, what are we on, like I don't know what this is, 10th or 12th episode of season 3 that I'm filming. I don't know because I'm behind in posting, but let's say it's the 10th. And I had like 15 or so of season 2 and 15 or 16 of season 1. So I'm on like 40th episode plus. There's been times when I have not recorded video, or like the last episode where I screwed it up and you haven't seen it. Probably if you add all that up, I've played maybe 50 hours of this character already, and we're only level 34. So it's frustrating to hear that you might have to play your character for 25 hours before you know whether you're going to like to play it or not. Like, didn't I already invest 25 hours in it? But unfortunately, it's just the nature of the game. And although I can give you a little bit of help and maybe save you from some of the experimentation, I can't save you from all of it, because there's a degree to which you have to decide whether what I'm suggesting would be fun for you. Now, it's great to watch somebody like me who's been doing this for years, especially if you're a new player. Anybody's a veteran player, doesn't matter. But if you're a new player, you haven't been playing the game long, maybe you haven't even decided you want to play the game and just watch what I'm doing. Oh, man, what Scrapper's doing looks like so much fun. You've got to realize that a lot of this is second nature to me, and although this is a power set I've never played before, it's similar enough to the other Brute and Scrapper power sets that I've played that it's not that hard to just extrapolate and do it, right? And you shouldn't expect yourself to be able to do this sort of thing second nature on a different character with different archetype power set, different enhancements, and so on and so forth. It's going to play a little differently. And even if you made up a Brute exactly like this one with the same power sets and the same enhancements at the same levels, you may not be able to play it the same way I do, because you just got a different set of sort of different timing for yourself, and you're using the keyboard instead of the clicking, and that's going to change a little bit how it works. You might be way better at this Brute than I am, or you might not be. It just may not be comfortable for you, right? Even if you're okay at it, you might not just like it. So, yeah, I strongly recommend don't necessarily watch people doing Let's Plays and intend to, let me get out of this thing, intend to play it exactly the way they do, because like you may not be able to, right? It just may not be a good fit for your personal play style. Oh gosh, he's got to go into the stupid... these guys. Let's go down here and fight these guys. And that's why people do not like Disorient, because he wandered all the way down the hall and out of range, and he wandered into the red, which means then I got to go in there and take damage to fight him, which I'm not going to do. But it's worth it. Now we can't fly until I get out of these mud pots. Here we go. It's worth this occasional annoyance of the way Disorient works for the great damage mitigation of the way Disorient works. It sort of reminds me of years ago when I was first learning how to play Crusader Kings and Europa Universalis, which are both by Paradox Game Studios. They're grand strategy games. And I was considering buying them. And there's a guy named, I've mentioned it before in my Let's Plays, a guy named Arumba. It's his login name. I don't know what his real name is. And he's kind of a vet at this. And he's played thousands and thousands of hours. He's played as much of that game, more of that game, than I've played of City of Heroes. And I played a lot of City of Heroes. And everything just sort of second nature to him. He knows all the math of the game. He knows exactly how everything works. And so you'll see him like take a single county in a kingdom, or in Crusader Kings, or what they call an OPM, a one province minor country, and conquer the world. And he does it like in a few hundred years super easily, and he just knows exactly how to manipulate the system. Whatever the strength of his kingdom is, he can work with it, and he just kicks butt. And it's pretty much like me playing Scrappers and Brutes and Stalkers in this game. So I watched him do the Kingdom of David, I think it is, where he took this Ethiopian Jewish character and reforged the Kingdom of David in Israel and so on and so forth. And he did this like super easily. I mean, he had a bunch of goofy stuff happen, and he would sometimes like do silly things, and yet he still conquered the Holy Land, which is super hard to do in Crusader Kings, unless you're a really big empire. And he started out weak, and he became a huge empire, and he like took over Arabia and everything from Ethiopia, and he took over parts of Europe and Asia and stuff. It was just insane. And he also, at one point, he was Portugal, and he took over the New World. And one of the things he was able to do as Portugal was he knew how to manipulate the system to make it so that Spain and France and the other countries were not able to colonize South America at all. He was trying to stop them from getting into the New World at all, and he wasn't able to do that, but he got all of South America or whatever. So I'm like, oh, this looks pretty easy. I'll take Portugal, right? And he started out with like some little war in Africa where he took over the northern part of Africa, and then he started colonizing parts of Africa, and then he leapfrogged over to South America. And like, I couldn't even conquer the first country that he did the way he did. Now, part of the reason is he was doing something. Like the developers used to watch him, and they saw that what he was doing was a little too easy, and they patched it out, and I didn't know that. Right? So that's part of the problem. But the other problem is, even after they patched it out, he was working with another gamer to show her how to do stuff, and they decided to be Portugal together, and he was showing her what to do. And he was still able to do a bunch of conquest that I could not do when I was doing Portugal, right? He's just good at it. It's all second nature to him. This guy's a boss, so let's get some inspirations going. And same thing with Crusader Kings. I mean, he could take any country in any one of these games and get whatever the badge is, the achievement, right? He would have his Patreons or whatever vote for what achievement should we get today, right? Or in this playthrough, and then he would just play until he got that achievement. You're gonna aid me? Well, I'm not gonna. I'm gonna ignore you. You can help me if you want, but I'm gonna ignore you and just fight people. And if you live, you live, and if you die, you die. Don't care. This isn't either one of them, is it? Oh, or is that a Charis? No, it is a Charis. Okay. Well, I'd kind of like to help a Charis, but whatever. So, my point is, I couldn't, even though I was watching him, and like at one point I was playing Portugal and pausing the video to see what he was doing, and I was trying to make the exact same moves, and the computer just wasn't reacting to me the way it's reacting to him. And, you know, I mean, some of it may be that he puts it on like hard, and you'd say, well, it's easier, you should be able to do it even easier if it's not on hard mode. That's true. Maybe. But the problem you have, is this an ambush? Where'd he go? Where is he? Okay, I'm ignoring. The problem you have with something like that is that maybe easy mode doesn't react the way you need it to react to do the exploit he's using, or maybe not exploit, but the trick that he's using to, you know, defeat the enemies or whatever. And so it doesn't always translate one-to-one, and you shouldn't expect the game to play the way somebody you're watching plays it. It might not be fun for you. It might be fun to watch, but playing it might not be fun. So you really need to kind of, you know, I hate to say this because it makes it seem like I'm not being helpful, but to some degree you have to sort of suss out for yourself what it is that's fun for you about the game and why you enjoy it and what parts of it you enjoy, and make sure you experience those, right? And I can't do that for you any more than a Roomba could tell me what was going to be fun for me to do in Crusader Kings or in Europa Universalis. was actually super fun for me, but my best friend got bored with it. Was actually playing Europa Universalis with my best friend. We played over in like the Siam area. I actually was Bengal, I think, and he was Ayutthaya. And he unfortunately got landlocked and didn't have any trade routes to use or something, and had a lot of trouble with it. But I was going in there and trying to help him. We actually made some pretty good progress after a lot of struggling, where I had a really good trading fleet and I was able to just trade him money, and we allied with each other, and it was basically us against, the rest of like the Indian subcontinent and Siam and stuff in that part of southern Asia. And I don't know, I think we could have pulled it out, but he got tired of it and didn't want to play it anymore, and that was sort of the end of it. But to me, after playing for a while, I realized, yeah, what's fun for me about grand strategy games is teaming up with my best friend. We used to play Stellaris together. We used to play a couple of other these grand strategy games together, Civilization, etc. And what's fun for me is to play grand strategy games with him, and we team up and work together, right? Just like what's fun for me in City of Heroes is story arcs, not architect missions, not farming, and not doing the end game stuff, right? And that's the other thing I would say is you shouldn't expect, playing Incarnate Trials to play anything like what you're watching me do here. All right, so how do I get to that spot? This way? No, this is sending me backwards. That's sending me backwards. Here we go. Maybe this way? Oh no, that's the prison. So there's got to be a way. There must be an exit over here. Yeah. We may have to come back to the prison to get Zoria, but let's get the glowy over here while we're looking at it, at the dot on the screen. And that's the mission. And we just got reward merits, 35 more, which puts us at 579, guys. So it may be that if I can get enough merits from the flashback missions that I'm going to do now, by the time we hit 35, we might be able to do our first archetype origin enhancement set. Let's head out and talk to our contact. And we got like a whole bead, and we got a new contact, Percy Winkley. Excellent. So we will do him after I do my flashback missions, and one of the first things I've got to do is turn off XP. Okay, just trying to get my bearings there. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. Hopefully, my discussion about melee characters and energy damage types and stuff wasn't confusing. I really want to emphasize that a lot of this is personal taste, right? It's sort of like saying to me, how can you give me your recipe for this particular food so that I will enjoy it? But I don't know if you're going to like the level of seasoning that I use. My mom got to a period in her life where she wasn't using a lot of salt in her own cooking, and you can kind of lose your acclimation to salt. And then I remember we went to Disney World, and she and I sometimes ordered the same food, and she would say, "This is so salty." And I'm like, "No, it's not." And my sister was like, "Yeah, it's because she doesn't cook with a lot of salt at home, and so even a little bit of salt tastes salty to her." So we ordered the same meal, and I liked it, and she thought it was too salty. And so that's the thing. I can teach you how to cook recipes like this, but there's no guarantee you're going to like the flavor. All right, folks, we're going to stop there. I hope you enjoyed. I will take a break from filming and do a bunch of flashback stuff. Try to get enough reward merits to get us very close to 600, so at least the next story arc will put us over. Until next time, I am Scrapperlock, and this has been City of Heroes.